In the case of my next guest, he was even locked up in a Medi hotel for a couple of weeks for the crime of returning to his home state. That man is Senator Alex Antic. He joins me now in the studio. Senator, great to have you on the show. I don't want to just turn this into a COVID bashing session, right? But you raised a whole bunch of questions. You suffered penalties for it. Your own experience in this is a warning for everyone. Just quickly run us through what happened.
Well, look, Cory, I think you've summed that up quite nicely, and I think it was. I think it felt very career limiting. I think at the time, having a say about these things that people were in such a state of fear, and that was I suppose the great issue is the fear people were suffering from. But it's the old political theory of the Overton window, which is something you'd know very well, very, very well, being an early adopter on many of these. You're an early adopter on China and, even a whole range of other issues which got you into trouble at the time, which turned out to be pretty accurate. So, look, politics is about speaking the truth. We have to speak the truth. And if that means getting people's noses out of joint, well, so be it. We've just got to keep doing it. And from my point of view, looking back now and seeing what happened, it is what it is. But ultimately, we just have to make sure these things don't happen again. With the sort of things we saw during that period, I don't know whether it's ingrained in the DNA, having had parents that, for one parent that fled from communist Europe, but the people from Eastern Europe kept saying to me, we've seen this before. This looked like a slow, steady creep of socialism coming into Australia with very little resistance, and it worried me more than anything's worried me before in public life.
It's hugely challenging, I've got to say, because you asked merely for statements from authority, you wanted research, you wanted all the things that were used to justify what the authorities were telling us, and yet you got stonewalled. I'm going to say you got imprisoned, but you got locked up in a Medi hotel. You didn't have COVID. You didn't. What did you do during that time? What was your great crime?
Well, look, there are probably many people that would say there were great crimes out there. Crimes of lack of ability in comedy and that sort of stuff. But the actual reality of it was nothing. Trying to return home and getting the geniuses at SA Health, of which there are many, by the way, offside, all the time, which wasn't very difficult. But look, honestly, it was sort of serendipitous in the sense that it gave me, somebody who really didn't suffer that much. I mean, let's be frank. I mean, I was still employed. I was able to do all the things that I did. I had a platform. It enabled me to use that platform to tell the world what was going on in Australia, because many people were worried. Many people overseas in the overseas commentariat could not believe it. When I described what I could see outside the window with big metal cages around the Medi Hotel and police downstairs, some of these US commentators just simply could not believe it. So you got to make lemonade when your life gives you lemons, and that's what we did. And look, I think it bells the cat on a lot of the future things that we've got now, and some of the conspiracy theories, so-called conspiracy theories, as you say, 6 months between conspiracy theory and reality. I think we're going to see it all over again. People need to wake up to this stuff.
Yeah, they do. And mate, next time they give you lemons, get some tequila and some salt, you'll have a much better time. Trust me on that.
You're probably right.
All right, I don't want to limit myself to COVID here, but there's so much to unpack there. But there are areas of the zeitgeist that we should be concerned about. I mean, the talking points seem to flow out of the World Health Organization or the WEF or out of government even here, and they just filter out, and there's very little questioning of the narrative. A lot of people don't want to push back. What other areas do you see that we should be worried about?
I mean, I think some of the things that we saw, maybe 2 years ago at the start of this, we're starting to see in other areas now. Like, I mean, if you look at the news recently, we've seen, I think in Sri Lanka, people using QR codes in order to get petrol at a petrol station. So the creep of social credit, I think, is one. And I think COVID really softened the ground, tenderised us for that. QR codes to check in, this magnificent, for the way that's sarcastic, for those that need to hear it, home quarantine app that our government rolled out last year, which really was doing nothing more than keeping track of people in a very CCP sort of way. These sorts of incursions onto freedom, I think, now are in the horizon. The other one I've got to say is the digital ID legislation, which I don't think politics is worried enough about. I don't think, inside that Parliament House building, it's like a vortex sometimes, Cory. You go in there and all of a sudden people are talking about, the Voice or a federal ICAC, and if you went and threw a dart out the window, you wouldn't find anyone that's talking about that. The sort of things people are talking about out in the street are their concerns about cost of living issues. In the case of mothers, all mothers ever tell me is they're worried about what their kids are being taught at school. All I hear is my kids are getting indoctrinated. We want education, not indoctrination. And so, in order to get people to understand this stuff, I think it's hard. We've got to get politicians to understand it as much. And the only best way to do that, I think, is getting real people into politics.
Yeah, I agree with that, actually. You've got to get people who are there for a cause and want to be aware of what's going on around them. You touched on this digital ID stuff, and I think this is critical because there is a push right around the world for digital ID. It's to keep us safe online, to make us not subject to bullying and not be snowflakes. But the second aspect of this is the central bank digital currencies. Right. And quite openly, it is about governments being able to, and they've boasted about being able to program what you're allowed to buy and what you're not.
Yep.
So if they can track everything you do, they can track everything you buy, they then have effective control over your life. Now, this is not alarmism, this is not conspiracy theory, this is admitted in almost every forum.
Yep.
Why are our politicians allowing it and celebrating it?
I think it's even worse than that as well. I mean, we saw this with the trucker movement in Canada, and we've seen PayPal making overtures about this as well.
They've implemented that. They said they withdrew it, and then they've introduced it again. You can now get fined $2,500 by PayPal if you put something online that they don't like and don't agree with. That's part of it. Close your accounts, people.
Yeah, this is. I mean, quite literally, it's happening already in front of us. And I think you only have to look at those examples to realise how far we are down. This is like the fax machine of the sort of. I'm going to try and do
I don't even have a fax machine.
I was going to try and draw some clever analogy, but I'm not smart enough. So let's just draw to that. But it is early stages. It's early adopting, and what we will find out, I think, pretty soon is these were the early stages of what is basically going to be control. I mean, the government is, any government all around the world that wants to do this potentially will have great control over people's lives simply by checking what they're doing. Have you been naughty or nice on a social media platform? This is what happens in China. If you cross the road the wrong way, you can't get a train ticket.
Quite often people say, I don't have anything to hide. Yep. Why should I be worried about this? My response often is, well, not many people's text messages would withstand all scrutiny or their browsing history on the internet.
Mine would.
But it's worse than that, isn't it? Because it doesn't matter whether you've done something good or bad. It's up to someone else who's now determining whether you've bought too many Big Macs today or you've bought too much booze or... whatever.
That's exactly right. I mean, the point is, well, first of all, nobody should ever want to have that sort of incursion in their life for a whole range of reasons. One of them is being that, of course, that the subjective test of what's right and wrong, what's naughty or nice, falls into the hand of, some sweaty bureaucrat, sitting in the basement of SA Health or somewhere like that.
And only Santa should have that responsibility of determining who's naughty and nice, isn't it?
We're all getting bags of coal otherwise, which is good. We need it right at the moment.
Coal is just an undiscovered diamond, mate. That's all it is. It's a diamond in the making. That's how I look at it. Alex, you've got enormous challenges. Have you got some colleagues in Canberra who support these sorts of issues, this speaking up about it, and are prepared to limit their own careers, if I can put it like that, for the greater good?
Yeah, look, there are lots of good people, and I think we can't be too unkind about those that are doing this work a different way. We had lots of people behind the scenes, and I know there are lots of people screaming and shouting about the things that happened last year. Not everybody needs to be a spear thrower. We know what happens. You draw a lot of fire when you do that. There are a lot of good people doing a lot of work behind the scenes. There still are. I have to say I was really, really encouraged by Peter Dutton's words about radical gender theory last night in the budget review. I think he's going to surprise a lot of people with this fight. I think it's really good. People want to hear this stuff. And I think increasingly we're going to see more and more of that. So I'll be encouraging it, and I'll be encouraging people to join me in political life. Come and join me. If you want to get involved, let's support good people. Let's get them in.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why people tune into this show, because we talk about the stuff that others won't. And it's just so important.
Correct.
Senator Alex Antic, thank you very much for joining me.